Hey guys, in the fast lane here. In this video I'm going to do a little turbo diagnosis, why I'm getting oil coming out of the turbine side on the piston seal. Pretty much what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the turbo drain or return line, and I'm going to drop the car down to level or however high it normally is when it's driving. And what that'll do is if any oil comes out when I drop it down through the return hole, then that means that the oil was too high to begin with, and that was what causing it to back up into the drain hose and then causing the foamy stuff to go, foamy oil. Usually it gets foamy when it circulates through the journal bearings, and then it backs right up into the turbine. A lot of people call it the oil seal, but it's actually a piston ring. That's the real name for it. Alright, so I'm going under the vehicle and I'm going to remove my drain hose, which is right here. I'm going to take this off, I'm going to pull it off, and I'm going to drop the car down. Now, as you can see here, this is a freshly built turbo, but I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can get a better angle. There we go. You can see how it's damp right there. See how it's damp right up in the corner? That's right there. There we go. Yeah, that's backing up, and it could be caused by crankcase pressure, but also it's a main problem with the return. Now my return slope is pretty good, so you can see there's a slope. I mean, it's a good slope, so that shouldn't be causing any problems. So I'm thinking that my oil level is probably up here somewhere. I kind of threw my dipstick down and just put it up to where it would be normally and let the dipstick hang out here. Now I know it curves a little bit, so that might take away a little, but it was actually the top dot was right here. And this is as high as I can go with this flange. I can't go any higher. It's practically touching the nut on the oil pan. So I'm going to disconnect this, and I'm going to drop the car down and see if it pours out. I'm going to have a pan under here. If it does, then obviously the level was too high. Kind of like leveling out your transmission, where you pull the top plug and let the excess drain out, and then when it does, that's where it needs to be. So we're going to try that, and then I'll check the dipstick and see how high we are up the dipstick, and that will give me an idea where I need to fill it from now on. As you can see, I just removed the return line. Now when I removed the turn line, nothing came out, so obviously jacking the vehicle up kind of allowed the rest to drain in, if that's the problem. So don't worry about that. Always stick your finger in there, make sure it checks, see if you can't feel any kind of cloggage. Sometimes the hoses get brittle. Anyway, stick your finger in there, stick your finger in here, maybe kind of shine a flashlight, make sure you don't have any blockage. A lot of things can cause blockage, including RTV. If RTV is overlapping in the hole, that will slow it down, but this one, I put this on before the pan was assembled and made sure it was smooth on the inside. Same thing with the return flange on the turbo, make sure you don't have any kind of RTV overlapping. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the vehicle down, and we'll see if it starts dripping out. If it does, then that means it was too high to begin with. So as I suspected, I've dropped the vehicle down. It's not even all the way down, and it's way over the oil return line. So this is definitely the problem right here. So I'm just going to let it run. You can see it's slowing down right now. But for the guys out there that keep thinking your turbo's messed up, it's not that. It's actually the level of your oil is way too high. Now I was on the second dot, at the very top of the second dot, so I'm probably maybe a quart over. So I'm gonna let this drain out. I'm gonna drop it even more, but as you can see right here, everybody and their grandmother was telling me that it was my turbo, and I know better than that because I rebuilt it, and this is the second turbo I've rebuilt, and it did the same thing. So check your oil levels. This would be a good telltale sign. Take your return off and drain it, because if it's over, if it's even, you want it at the bottom, like maybe right here. You don't want it to be coming up. I mean, this is as high as you can go in the pan, so you can't get much higher than that. The pickup sits somewhere around down here, right around this area. So if you're still right here at the bottom, you still got plenty of oil for the pickup to pick it up. So also, if you're too high, you don't want your crank to be slapping the oil. That'll actually slow it down. Too high of oil will cause mess your piston rings up. Could surge the oil pump a little bit and cause too much oil pressure. But the main reason is just to keep it underneath the crank and also for a turbo return line. So I'm going to drop it down even more, and we'll see where we're at on the dipstick once it's all done. Now keep in mind, if your return line is drilled into the pan too low and you drain your oil out, you could risk loss of oil pressure and blow your engine up. But if your return line is high up in the pan where it's supposed to be, like really as high as it can go, then there's nothing really to worry about as long as it's well above the oil pickup. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so here's where I'm at with the engine oil once it's completely drained out. You can see where it stops. If I can get a good angle, there we go. So this is where it stopped, right there. So it's a little above the bottom hole. I was completely right up here to the very tippy top of that hole. So I had to drain it all the way back till it was a little bit over that hole. And that's still within spec of the 2 dots. So that's where I need to be with the turbo. Now, I do keep in mind that once I start the engine, it's going to process and it could drop a little bit. But I might add just like a quarter of a quart more just so it stays at that level. But we'll see how it does. Alright, so here's a better look at it. I put a line in the dipstick, just scratched it with a little utility knife. So that's where I want to be all the time from now on. So I'm going to make sure I fill it to that point when I do oil changes. Obviously run the engine after you do the oil change, and then turn it off, let it sit for like 10-15 minutes, then check it, and that's where you want to be, because it'll drop on your first refill if you don't fill the oil filter and it's got to process through the engine. So that's where I want to be, not necessarily where you want to be, because everybody puts their return port in the oil pan different height, maybe just a little bit more. So if you go up like 1/4 inch, that's going to be, you know, 3/4 of a quart or half a quart, or you know, it's going to be a big difference because you got to consider the whole volume of the pan. Alright, so here's how much oil I drained out. It's a good amount. I'm going to put it in this right here, this bottle, and it tells me how many quarts and stuff I've used, so, or I drained. So I'm going to fill it up real quick and we'll see how much I was over. Here's the verdict. I was over 1 whole quart. As you can see right there. Right here is the oil level. You can see where it's stopping. 1 quart. I was over an entire quart. So I use this one, which is Pennzoil. It's 5W30, and it's 5 quarts. So it took me 5 quarts to get to the second dot on the dipstick. So a lot of people are putting the Honda manual requires 4.25 quarts for the GSR. Well, if you guys are putting in 4.25, you should be really just a little bit above the first line, like maybe halfway mark. Well, with 5 quarts, I've read in forums, a lot of guys were saying they were at 4.25 and they were at the second dot. Well, the second dot is 5 quarts. You're going to get a lot of crank splash from the bottom of the crank, and it's just not going to be good. So I'm going to stick with putting 4 quarts exactly in there for my setup, and whatever you guys have to do for your setup. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead, comment, like, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to check out my Facebook page, website, and Android app. All that can be found on my YouTube channel in the About Me section. I'm in the fast lane, and I'll see you guys next time.